I met my wife in college. We've been together ever since. After 3 years of dating, we started living together. We lived like that for another 3 years before getting married. 2 years later, my wife became pregnant, and we had a daughter. That's how life went on. Sure, we had our everyday arguments, what couple doesn't? But we always made up right away or even during the argument. In short, we had a classic family setup. After graduating, I got a job, then another, and started climbing the career ladder. Eventually, I earned enough to buy us an apartment. We renovated it nicely and moved in. My wife, by the way, went back to work after maternity leave. She did well, got a good position, and started earning decent money. Together with my income, we were making a very respectable amount. Over time, we accumulated everything, a home, even another apartment for our daughter to use in the future, expensive cars. As the saying goes, a house full of plenty. I loved my wife. I never cheated on her, and I didn't drink. Well, not heavily, at least. My wife's work was connected to international business, so colleagues from abroad often flew in for negotiations. A little over a year ago, I began noticing that when these colleagues visited, my wife started staying out much later than she had in the past. But I didn't pay much attention to it. In the evenings, right before bed, she'd receive a flood of messages on Telegram or WhatsApp. I noticed something peculiar. When her foreign colleagues were in town, those evening messages would stop. A couple of times, when she fell asleep, I checked her phone. But all the messages were deleted. For example, I clearly remembered her phone chiming at 11 p.m., but when I checked later, there were no messages after 7 p.m. in any chat. Then came the moment when a worm of suspicion burrowed deep inside me. One time, she came home late again, around 10 p.m., and I joked, "So, did you see your lover off?" I'd never seen such a frightened look in her eyes before. But when she noticed me smiling, she quickly smiled too and looked away, calling me an idiot. Moreover, she sometimes traveled abroad to visit her colleagues. One day, when the worm of suspicion had gnawed me to my core, I gave in and installed a spy app on her phone. It allowed me to control the device remotely, record the surroundings, take pictures using the camera, and send everything to a private account. When she left on another business trip, I came home after work, helped my daughter with her homework, and put her to bed. Then, I logged into the app's dashboard and sent a command to record 10 minutes of her phone's surroundings. About half an hour later, the recording appeared. I listened and realized she was in a room with a man. They were speaking in English, discussing personal and mundane topics, laughing. It became clear that they were alone. Then I heard glasses clinking and her laughter. At that moment, my pulse shot through the roof. I sent another command to record for 20 minutes and take a picture. The image that came back was a black square. I understood the phone was lying face down. I sent a command to use the front camera, and the photo revealed the phone on a bedside table in a hotel room, with part of a bed visible. 15 minutes later, I received another recording. My hands were shaking as I pressed play. It was more talking and laughter. I was already in a state of disbelief, like this was all a nightmare. My world was falling apart before my eyes. I poured myself a drink, sent a command to record for 4 hours, and got drunk out of my mind. The next morning, my daughter woke me up for school. I told her she could stay home and texted work to say I was taking a couple of days off. My wife was set to return on Sunday. Alone at home, I listened to the 4-hour recording but only got through 40 minutes. That was all I could take. It was unmistakably her voice, but in a way I had never heard in our 13 years together. It felt like being physically stabbed. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. I don't know whether it was from the alcohol or the situation. For the rest of the day, I went through cycles of rage, sadness, and numbness. Each emotional outburst seemed to kill off another part of the love I'd nurtured for her all these years. By the evening, I was emotionally dead. I sent commands to the app again and saw photos of her in a restaurant, seemingly with colleagues. But at night, her phone was back on the bedside table, and the recordings were unmistakable. Only this time, there were no words, just the sounds of her and him together. I couldn't take it anymore and called her. She picked up on the fourth ring, out of breath. I asked why she was panting, and she said the elevator had broken, so she was taking the stairs. I managed to keep my composure, wished her a good night, and hung up. Then I sent another command to take a series of photos. This time, the phone was on the bed, and I got a clear shot of her sitting naked astride another man. Then came an audio recording where I could clearly hear the familiar sounds of my wife's voice. Sounds any husband would recognize, and I knew exactly what was happening. That was the last straw for me. I saved all the recordings and photos. At that point, she felt like a stranger to me already. For the rest of her trip, I didn't try to gather more information, everything was clear. Instead, I started thinking about what to do next. Divorce? A scandal? But what about our daughter? She was only 9 years old. On Sunday evening, closer to her return, she came home and tried to kiss me. I pulled away, reminded her I wasn't feeling well, and went to sleep on the couch in my office. The next morning, I woke up early, left for work before she got up, and spent the entire day like a zombie. Eventually, I gathered all the recordings and photos, put them on a flash drive, and recorded a video message to her on my phone while sitting in a conference room at work. In the video, I asked all the questions running through my mind. Why? What were you thinking? Was I such a terrible husband that you could just flush me down the drain like this? It was full of the kind of emotional outpouring you'd expect in such a situation. Then I went to my boss and requested an urgent week-long vacation. I called my wife and told her I was leaving on a work trip that same day. I asked her not to pick up our daughter from her grandmother's, saying I had a surprise planned for her. That evening, I returned home, packed a bag, and threw the flash drive on the bedside table in the bedroom. Without saying much, I left in a taxi and went to our second apartment, the one we had bought for our daughter's future. From there, I called a friend and asked if he wanted to take a spontaneous trip abroad. He agreed, and that night we booked tickets. Early the next morning, we flew to Munich. While there, I told him everything. We drank, partied, and spent time with women. Honestly, I no longer felt any obligation to my wife. When she called, I didn't answer. I only texted her once to say there was a flash drive on the bedside table, and I wanted her to watch it. About 30 minutes later, my phone lit up with call after call, and messages poured in. I didn't even bother reading them. I didn't care anymore and turned my phone off. We stayed in Munich for 3 more days. By Saturday, I flew back home. Upon landing, I turned my phone on, and it took 5 minutes just to process all the missed messages and calls. I didn't read any of them. I didn't want to risk getting angry before stepping into the apartment. When I entered, there was silence. I quietly set my bag down, took off my shoes, and went to wash my hands. Then she came out of the bedroom. I had never seen her look like that before, swollen, disheveled, her face a mess. She dropped to her knees and started crying, trying to explain herself through sobs and apologies. I kept my face emotionless and told her not to put on a show. Then, in a calm tone, I asked, "What are we going to do now?" She begged me to forgive her, calling herself horrible names and saying she didn't understand how she'd let things go so far. She claimed she still loved me and had always loved me, saying it only happened because she had become spoiled and ungrateful. She said that in the days I was gone, she had realized the full extent of what she had done. But as they say, revenge is a dish best served cold. I told her, we're no longer husband and wife. Now, we're just mom and dad for our daughter. We'll act like everything is fine, but I'll live my own life, and you can live yours. You're no longer my one and only, you're just my partner in raising our child. I told her that maybe, someday, I might change my mind, but right now, the mere thought of being close to her made me sick. I also told her where I had been and what I had done. She said she understood and that she was willing to endure whatever it took to make things right. Well, no one forced her to say that. Now, we live under the same roof, though I've already bought another apartment and put it in my father's name to avoid any complications in case of a property split. I mostly sleep in my office, though sometimes, for appearance's sake in front of our daughter, I sleep in the bedroom. There have been a couple of times when she tried to hug me when I lay down beside her, but I immediately shut her down. We haven't been intimate in 6 months. I haven't told my relatives anything. Only my father knows. We agreed to go on family vacations once a year for a week, but now we'll always have separate beds. I spend a lot of time with friends, bought myself a motorcycle again, quit smoking, and joined a gym. I've lost 10 kilograms, and my abs are starting to show again. Sometimes I wonder when she'll finally say she's had enough and leave or file for divorce so we can divide the assets. But she doesn't. I constantly catch her looking at me with those pleading eyes, like Puss in Boots from Shrek. But honestly, I don't care anymore, even though I can see she's trying. I just savor her pain. Recently, I deliberately left a pack of condoms on my office desk to see how she would react. She came in to say something, saw them, and bolted out, probably to cry. I didn't chase after her. She still goes to work but doesn't stay late anymore, not that I keep track. At one point, she tried to explain that she had cut ties with that man except for work-related matters and that she would only communicate with him through emails or at negotiations. She swore she wouldn't even approach him. I told her that her relationships with her sexual partners were none of my business and that she didn't need to report to me whether she spread her legs that day or not. I now come home late sometimes or leave after our daughter goes to bed. On Fridays, for example, I indulge myself in whatever I want. If I feel like having sex, I will. I come home in the early hours and either sleep in my office or the bedroom if she isn't there. In our routine, nothing has changed. I still buy groceries, cook, and handle household chores. Cleaning is done by a housekeeper, so nothing has changed there. I continue to pay for everything. What she spends her money on, or if she even spends it, is none of my concern. We communicate like a loving couple only when it involves our daughter or her parents. If I told my mother-in-law, she'd probably strangle her daughter right in front of me. My relationship with my mother-in-law is excellent. She's a respectable woman who values family highly. That might be another reason my wife doesn't want to leave. She's probably afraid of her mom. I reject her personal requests, saying she should have chosen a lover from the same city to help her out. In short, I mock her however I can, and I enjoy it. Yes, maybe I'm a monster now, but she created this monster. What amazes me is her persistence and patience. It's like a red rag to a bull for me. I'm curious to see how much longer she can endure. Maybe someday, when I'm tired of testing her, or I feel it's enough, I'll turn off my jerk mode and talk to her. But not now.